Good afternoon to you. Mark Stott of HurricaneTrack.com here. It is Monday, May 15th, 2023, and it's time for the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion video series to resume. Can I get a big round of applause out there, please? Thank you very much. It's good to be here. Was out in the Great Plains last week doing some work in the alley out there, Tornado Alley, testing some equipment, working on the back end of things, making sure that we are ready for the upcoming hurricane season, while at the same time observing and experiencing and reporting on some of the severe weather that took place last week. Very interesting times. I appreciate all the people that helped out. So let's take a look at stuff. We've got a few headlines here to take a gander at, as they say. The first one, this is a big one. Yes, if you didn't notice, over the winter, National Hurricane Center has decided to go to 7-day graphical tropical weather outlooks. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the start of the Pacific hurricane season, or at least the Eastern Pacific. And did you miss this back in January? I remember this. That looked like a subtropical storm to us, or maybe even almost like a hurricane with limited convection. And lo and behold, NOAA, our friends at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has determined that we did have a January subtropical storm. So once we get to the real hurricane season, whatever the next one is will be number 2. This one didn't get a name. I don't know why. It should be Arlene, because we do name subtropical storms. But again, as I say often as well, us humans just like to label things and classify things. It helps to keep order. I guess it doesn't matter what it's called. It had impacts, especially up in parts of Nova Scotia. I do believe lots of people were talking about it. And there you go. So it was a subtropical storm. So we've already had kind of one. It's an anomaly. It was out there over warm water. The atmosphere is very cold around it, so it was able to generate that convection because there was a lot of extra instability. So it was a lot easier to get one of these to form, even though the Atlantic was generally colder than what we're used to seeing, and it wasn't June, July, August, September, or whatever. All right, let's move along. That's done. Now, to the National Hurricane Center homepage. We'll be using this presumably a lot this year. Today marks the beginning of the Eastern Pacific hurricane season. We will, of course, be looking at the Atlantic hurricane season soon enough, but the National Hurricane Center, starting, I guess it was last year, began issuing tropical weather outlooks May 15th. The hurricane season hasn't started 2 weeks sooner, which is odd, but whatever. So they do get, like, everything's lumped together. We have tropical weather outlooks, both the text product, which is this right here, and the graphical tropical weather outlook, which is, of course, this for the 48-hour time frame, and then 7 days. Yes, no new tropical cyclones are expected over the next 7 days, so that outlook will extend out to 7 days. So what might happen, let's get the color red on here, maybe we get an area that comes off Africa, one of these tropical waves, and we're going to see a huge development area, maybe. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how that is handled, because 7 days, don't they tell us, and I tell you, and people tell everybody else, oh, don't look at the models beyond 5 days. They're not very good. So we'll see how all this plays out. Something interesting. Will it be yellow, and then eventually, like, part of it orange because they expect it to become medium later, and then red at the end because by day 7 it's expected to be high probability? We'll find out together, like I said. So, interesting changes that the National Hurricane Center has made for the upcoming year. All right, so here are the names for the Eastern Pacific, and we'll get through a lot of these, I do believe. I think it'll be a busier season than average because of the oncoming El Nino. We'll talk about that more in a minute. We're going to start with Adrian. We have names on there like Dora and Greg and Hillary, all the way down through Lydia. Kenneth is in there. Max, Norma, Otis, Pilar, Ramon. Maybe we get down to the S's and T's this year. That wouldn't surprise me. Selma, Todd, possibly. We shall see. By the way, going back to this map, most of the Eastern Pacific hurricane activity stays out into the open Pacific, kind of like that. But occasionally you get a trough that comes up here, and it allows these to turn more to the north and east with time towards Mexico. That can happen farther to the south. And those tracks can come up the Baja and leave the remnants of these systems headed for the southwest United States, where it can increase moisture and make all kinds of interesting things happen. And when that happens, yours truly heads out west. I've been to Mexico one time. That was back in 21 for Hurricane Pamela. It's very difficult. There's other chasers that handle that a lot better, and I think that's fine. So I will handle the United States, maybe Cancun, the Cozumel region. That's a little bit more easy to get to, especially from the U.S., without as many worries about having to travel across a lot of landscape with different tensions going on and things like that. It's just a little easier for me to focus probably on Cozumel and Cancun if the need ever arises, basically the Yucatan instead of Pacific Mexico in terms of in-person intercepts. But we will certainly cover any potential activity here, and through social media I'm sure we can get some good reports from people down there. But I'm telling you, when these get into the southwest United States, we get a lot of flooding potential. Arizona, even California, Nevada, up into Utah, it becomes very interesting, and I've covered a few of those in my career, and we'll stay on top of that potential impact as well. All right, so again, these are the names. We've covered that. Let's move along. So, normal stuff that we take a look at during the weekly update. What's going on with sea surface temperatures, and how are we doing with the ENSO, the El Niño Southern Oscillation phenomenon? Well, here we are just about 2 weeks until the start on a calendar of the Atlantic hurricane season. And I'll point your attention, let's drop me out for a minute so we can focus on the map. This is really still very compelling. A very warm eastern Atlantic, the colder subtropics over here, a far cry from what we saw last year, where the high latitudes were really, really warmer than average, and it kind of distorted things and made last year's hurricane season a real head scratcher. That was part of it. So we've got this. That's very favorable overall. Caribbean, pretty much normal to slightly above normal water temperature wise. The Gulf has calmed down a little bit in terms of its really high anomaly values. It's about where it should be, maybe a little bit warmer. And as we say often here, the Gulf will always be warm enough for intense hurricanes. El Nino or not, yes, the Gulf will always be a potential breeding ground for very strong hurricanes. So we want to make sure we are ready anywhere along the Gulf, and that includes the Mexican side as well, down in the Bay of Campeche. Now, what about our El Nino that's trying to come on? It is definitely making some progress. The warm anomalies, these departures from the long-term average, stretching out now across the equatorial region, but some of this has lost a little bit of its oomph, if you will. Those colors, or the anomalies, which is what it's translated into, the legend is just how we interpret it, were a couple of degrees warmer recently. They've kind of cooled off a little bit, and this is meanwhile spread across, use the analogy like butter on toast, or whatever you want to call it. And it's basically, the pattern is conducive to a slow transition towards El Nino, the abnormal warming of the tropical Pacific. I don't think it's going to happen rapidly, and I've got some evidence to back that up for you. All right, so let's take a look again at the broader picture. There's our El Nino coming on. So this is going to be interesting to watch. We still have this cold PDO look in the northern Pacific, in the subtropics up here, and we are starting to warm things up relative to average off the coast of Mexico, and that's going to be the area that we really start to watch basically from here on out. But this right here is really interesting, and I'm going to see if I can refresh it and make it animate again, and I can, so that's good. This is the subsurface, so this is a cross-section of this right through here. If you took a slice and you looked at that right there in the vertical, this is what you'd have. There's those warm anomalies in the eastern Pacific. That's about down to 50 meters deep or so. And this goes all the way down to 450 meters into the Pacific. Now notice this area right here, this big warm pool, it looked a lot angrier, if you will, a lot more enthusiastic or robust, whatever adjective you want to use, earlier. It seems to have thinned out. I mean, really, you can see that, right? I'm not like, I wanted to make sure when I looked at this myself that I wasn't like seeing things. It's like, that's not really the mark of a very strong El Nino coming on. And El Nino, yes, because all of this subsurface positive anomaly has to go somewhere. And the way the wind pattern is, it's conducive for the Pacific to warm. But we're not seeing like this massive string of dark colors like we have over here. Look at that. That all but I won't say evaporated, but it dissipated. It went away, and it looks like it's weakening overall. And there's nothing back here. There's not like more of this waiting to come across as part of what we call a downwelling Kelvin wave. Very fancy term that when you get westerly winds, you help to kind of push that conveyor belt into motion. We aren't really seeing that. Not in this map or graphic, the subsurface. And let's show you this. This is a very interesting graphic as well. These Hofmöller diagrams over from Dr. Ventris' website. Michael Ventris, right? Seen his stuff over the years. So the blues are enhanced trades, and this is all in the past. This is where we are now, and this is the future. Look what's coming. A pretty solid period of enhanced trades where longitudinally right there in the heart of the INSO region. That is very interesting. Yes, there are some westerly winds, but this is way, way over off our map here. I don't have the global map back over here. So there's 180 degrees longitude. That's the date line. We should see a pretty good amount of trade wind activity right through here, and that's going to put a dent in this, or at least stunt the growth of the El Nino, if this Hofmöller diagram is to be believed. And there's no reason to think that it'll be erroneous. Other versions of this from other websites, WeatherBell has them. I can't remember the other sites. I think, let's see, there's WeatherBell. I was trying to remember the one that Dr. Maui. There's too many pay sites out there. This one's over at Dr. Ventris' site. It's free. There's weathermodels.us. Thank you. I had to remember that. The guy upstairs finally clocking in. So yes, there are different versions of this to go out further into time, but this one goes out just the next 2 weeks or so. That's plenty for me. That's pretty interesting. And at the same time, we are not seeing any of these deep blues and purples over here. Longitudinally, that's the Atlantic. It's kind of a reduction in trades still. So the Atlantic should continue to stay warm relative to average, while the Pacific gets a little bit of a kickback, a little bit of a punch back from the trade winds, maybe keeping that El Nino from coming on as strong as we were thinking maybe just a few weeks ago. I don't think it's going to prevent it at all, but I think it's going to delay it, and it might be more of a fall and winter peak than what we were thinking just a few weeks ago. And again, this is really compelling to me. Just looking at that, how thin that has become, you're losing some of that gradient, if you will. You don't have these darker colors populating this area. And with enhanced trades, basically, that are going to happen through this area, right through here at the surface, it's going to be interesting. We might start to see some of the normal color come back, or maybe even some of this light blue when we check this in a couple of weeks. So there's a good hook for you. Come back, check again in a couple of weeks. We'll see what happens. All right, it is the beginning of the East Pacific hurricane season, so we're going to be looking at satellite images a lot. We'll be looking at the lower level vorticity, the spin in the atmosphere. I'll show you that product in just a minute. And again, our main area of, I don't want to say concern, but the areas that we watch the most this time of year will be down here off the coast of Mexico and Central America in the southeastern Pacific. You might get a disturbance that comes through there, maybe some westerly winds as the MJO comes across, or that's the Madden-Julian oscillation, or you get what's called a convectively coupled Kelvin wave. It's kind of like I said this before, it's like a shot of Red Bull. It's a smaller geographic area of favorable conditions that's denoted by a lot of convection, a lot of moisture, a reduction in wind shear, and that all-important westerly wind component at the lower levels of the atmosphere coming in this way, going against the normal trades that come this way. What happens in the middle? You get some spin, some added vorticity gets helped by these convectively coupled Kelvin waves, a smaller version, kind of, a relative of the Madden-Julian oscillation. None of that out there right now on our particular domain that we're looking at, the East Pacific, the Gulf of Mexico, the Western Atlantic. Interesting little feature over here, north and east of the Bahamas. Surface trough, maybe a weak area of low pressure down there, but upper level winds are far too strong, still too much in the way of westerly winds at the higher levels of the atmosphere, and that tears the tops of thunderstorms off. There are more westerlies here that you can clearly see, and they come even out of the United States, the lower 48 over here, off the continent of North America. it's early. It's not time to be looking at the Atlantic just yet, but we're not going to ignore it either because you never know. You know, we've had preseason name storms. Well, heck, we already have one in January, but you know what we're talking about. And this is a big help right here when we can look at the vorticity signature through the clouds. There's that little piece of energy near the Bahamas. Nothing much at all in the eastern Pacific, and certainly nothing to be watching right now in the deep tropics. We will reference this graphic quite often in the days, weeks, months to come. All right, so here's that particular product, if you will, the 850 millibar vorticity on the GFS. See right there, GFS 850 millibar geopotential height, etc. I'm looking to see, does anything come together right down in this area? This is the Pacific side. So let's put this into motion for the next, I don't know, week, since the National Hurricane Center goes out to 7 days on their graphical tropical weather outlook. So shall we. So there's 5 days, there's 6 days, and finally day 8. We rewind it just to look at it again. No, nothing gets to gets together, nothing like that in the eastern Pacific. In fact, you can see at the 5,000 foot level, that's what 850 millibars is. Just a pretty steady stream of trades blowing right on through here. You can see those wind barbs down there. Everything is generally from east to west. Nice and simple, right? No disruptions, no perturbations, as we call it, where the trade winds are perturbed or they don't change direction. No westerly winds coming anytime soon. And we saw that over here, right? So it's all matching up. All right, so here is the Atlantic version of that. This, too, will go out to 7 days. And we see some fronts come through the eastern United States. There's day 5 right there. And we get out to day 6 and then finally day 7 towards next Monday, a week out. And again, we'll be looking down here, mostly in the Southwest Caribbean, maybe off the Atlantic coast there, the Southwest Atlantic Ocean, and then the Gulf of Mexico this time of year. Accidentally drew a hidden Mickey there. That's okay for you Disney fans out there. But no, nothing developing in the vorticity fields over the next week or so. And that's good to see because it could be a busy season, especially with how warm the Atlantic is. It'll start when it starts. We don't need it starting too early. All right, like I mentioned, I was out on the plains all of last week. Glad I'm not there this week. And, you know, my job allows me the flexibility to go when we think the pattern is active. And so that's what we did. My team and I, Matt helped me. 2 Matts, a CJ, a Mike, and others. Tim, a whole bunch of people helping out either in person or on our back-end team. But seriously, this week, anybody doing those chasecations or storm chasing tours, whatever the case may be, not a very active week, which is good for people that don't want to deal with tornadoes and big hail. And we almost saw a tornado. It was very close. That wasn't the goal, though. I don't want to dwell on this part too long, but it was more of testing equipment, doing it in an environment that's just more interesting than sitting here in my backyard, right? And we saw a few wall clouds and big supercells and big hail and lots of lightning. And they had beneficial rain out there. That was great to see. And we got to test a lot of our capabilities on the back end, our live stream. CJ kind of hosting that. I think it was on Wednesday or Thursday. Wednesday, I think it was. Thursday as well. I don't know. It's been a long week. I'm glad I'm back because the road wears on you after a while. But let's get back to the present, shall we? This is today. Not much to worry about. Tomorrow there's a slight risk right down here in the Tar Heel State, as well as, I don't know all the nicknames, so I just walked into that one. Tennessee is the volunteer state, right? Let's see if I do know it. Kentucky's the bluegrass state, and Virginia, I just know they say Virginia is for lovers. And then a tiny little piece of West Virginia there. It's like the pipe stem state or something. I'm just making stuff up. But yes, slight risk in parts of the southern Appalachians. We'll just call it that. 2% tornado. Again, that's not 0. So heads up if you live in that area. And that does stretch all the way out to the coast there, the western side of the Chesapeake Bay, southwest side of the Chesapeake Bay. Some wind threat, maybe some hail through there. So again, the severe threat, not nothing, as they say, but it's not significant either. Finally, day 3, a little bit of activity out here just outside of the Front Range in that region. Some of this might get upgraded to a slight risk. You never know. Matt lives out there, one of our Matts that we work with. Maybe he can, well, we got a camera out there. We can just watch from his house. Anyway, hey, it's almost hurricane season in the Atlantic. That's what most of the people pay attention to. and why they come to our product. I know that. I'm not stupid. I mean, we are Hurricane Track, even though we cover other weather. So now's a good time to just remind you, real quick, what are we all about? Well, HurricaneTrack.com, the brand, everything we do, the Big Field Mission Project, all of that has been around since the late 90s. 1999 is when I started the website. Now it's more of, not a static billboard, but it's not as important, the website itself, at getting information out as the overall brand is. You understand that? So we use social media a lot. YouTube is our biggest video platform. We do utilize Twitter as well. We are active on Facebook, a little bit on Instagram. I tried TikTok. Sorry, younger generation. Couldn't hack it. So, and there's just too much to manage until we really grow big, like maybe even 1/10. And here at least I know some of these names of Mr. Beast's numbers. Yeah, if we get 1/10 of his numbers, then yes, we can afford a social media person, and I would be glad to do TikTok full time, but we got to get there. And Mr. Beast, by the way, is from right here in North Carolina, so there's that. But yes, we do the updates, and I will put an occasional blog, like I did today, on the homepage. And but that's our brand, HurricaneTrack.com. Like I said, we're on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and of course YouTube. And we are supported almost primarily through crowdfunding. Every bit of our equipment, in fact, big news here, I just ordered Starlink recently because it was crowdfunded. It's expensive. And I reached out to some of our supporters. I said, could you help make this happen? The hardware, the monthly fee, it's like $150 a month. Elon Musk and his company there, well, he probably won't send it personally. That'd be pretty cool. But yes, Starlink will be sending me that nice little box that it all fits in, and that'll give us some interesting capabilities, especially out west. But that's a story for another day. My point, most of what we do is crowdfunded, and that is done through Patreon. And we try to give you something in return, sense of community, updates that are exclusive, but I don't try to lock people out. That's not what it's about. It's more developing a crowd-funded project, crowd-sourced with ideas, equipment, even people helping out. Matt and CJ, all these folks, they were patrons originally, and now they help out. We've become good friends and colleagues at the same time, but that's what it's all about. So if you've been a member before, now's a good time to get back on. If you're curious about it, or you're just new to our channel, Patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. We have different memberships available, from the $4, where you just get access to Discord and the Patreon post, or the most popular $10 level, and even up from there, $25 and all the way up to $100. Whatever fits your needs, and you can downgrade if you need to, upgrade. It's very nice. Patreon has been very good to work with since about 2016, and we have grown it to be able to sustain this project year-round. And now that I'm working with Fox Weather for the next several years, that helps as well. So we have a great project, and I'm very proud of it, and it'll be awesome to have you as part of it. I'm trying to make me disappear because I got to show you this. The map. Yes, the 2020, if I can say it, the 2023 version of the hurricane tracking map is available. Now that's just a graphic, and you might say, well, how big is that? What am I looking at? I'll show you. Bring me back. This is that map right there. I'll let it take up the whole shot for a second. I'm going to pitch this to you because it's popular. People like these. I sell out every year, and I only print up about 100, 125 of them because a certain chunk of them go to our supporters at Patreon, and then the rest I make available to the general public, and they are only $20, and that does include shipping. I fold them up, and I put them in an envelope just like this, and I know it would be nice to ship them in tubes, but then it becomes even more expensive, and I don't want them to be $30. $20 I think is a fair price, because also it's like a work of art. I drew that map myself way back in 1999 on a PowerMac G3. The very first part of my business was all about maps, storm surge maps, tracking maps, multimedia projects related to that. And this is that map all these years later, the 2023 version. And you can get it at the link that I'll put in today's description through PayPal. Order it, I'll send it to you, fold it up, get yourself a Sharpie. That way you can use it, and you'll be good to go. All right, let me move my ringing phone over. It's just buzzing at me. Scam likely. That guy calls a lot. So yes, I'll put the link to this in the description. A lot to cover today, a lot that I threw at you, But hey, it's almost hurricane season. It's time to talk about this stuff. We'll be on top of it. We've got a great team. We've got a great group of people just like you out there in YouTube land. Please don't forget, the algorithms do matter. Like that button. Hit that button. Like it. I know the gamers say smash it, beat it up, blow it up, explode it. Do it. Make it work. Subscribe to the channel, and you'll get updates every time we put them out. And that includes live coverage, which is getting better and better. We got some great things coming, especially now with Starlink coming and our other weather coverage out. I mean, when we're on the coast, by the way, and I don't want to get into this yet because we're going to talk about Starlink later, but we use Verizon, paying customer, not a sponsor. Not that we wouldn't accept it. I'm just saying we are a paying Verizon customer. We're covered everywhere on the coast. I mean, it's like 99.9%. Starlink's going to be for the more remote areas, but that's what I'm talking about. When we go live, you want to know, I hope. So you got to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, and you'll know. All right, let me get this online for you. As always, thanks for tuning in. Good to see everybody. I'm sure a lot of you will be coming back as the hurricane season jumps forward, and I'll be here for you doing what I do best. Have a good rest of your week. I'm Mark Sudduth, Hurricane Track. I'll talk to you again next week.